So we wound up with 6 of us. There's an ensign that worked for me, male, a female enlisted girl who was qualified to dive, and my buddy commander, P3 pilot, who was not part of our command, but part of the P3 command, and then a chief in my organization that had taught how to rappel, because we knew we'd have to rappel down 475 feet from the top of the island to the front of the cave. In order to qualify to rappel, we were fortunate. The chief was part of a survival group back in the States and worked with the fire department and learned and qualified people on how to do rappelling. So he was a real asset. And before we could make the dive, there was a little mosquito or something bugging me here. But before we were allowed to go on it, I had to get some line, and we had to practice and learn how to rappel. And we tried it on a hillside first in Guam, and then we tried it from a 475-foot cliff in Guam. And I took one of our big vehicles with hooks in the front. We pulled up to that after we qualified, and we dropped the lines over, and all of the people that we taught, which was anybody that wanted to volunteer to get the training, of the 100 guys I had, and about 50 of them all wanted to get that training, and it was a fun thing. They would get to learn how to rappel, and they would be able to go on the practice rappelling. And once they rappelled and went down the 475 feet, they would land in about 4 feet of water, and then they had to take the trail that led for about 1.5 miles all the way back up to the top again so they could do it a second time. Well, that was a real morale builder for the troops to go and do that, and we did it many, many times. As long as they wanted to get qualified, I'd send a truck out there after working hours, and we dropped the lines down. We put 4 lines down, and they would rappel over it. And that made many of the troops that had nothing to do happy. Back to the dive. Now we decided the number of tanks and extra tanks we would need, because there was no way to refill the tanks with air or anything out there. So we agreed we would take 3 tanks each. We would take all of our dive gear, and we would take enough food and stuff to support us for at least 3 days in case we couldn't get the helicopter to come back and pick us up for some reason. So we set it all up, and I have some pictures of us loading it up on the helo, and I have some pictures of us together with our gear on and things before we left, and then we have some pictures when we were on Rota, and some pictures of the face of the island, of the entrance to the cave. And we set it up. We made sure that the weather was going to be good. We checked with the weather guesser, and he said we would have clear, balmy days for a week. And we checked with the wind and the wave action to make sure that if we were going to swim out to the thing on the second or third day, that we would not be washed out into no man's land. We would have to have the tide with us to get back to the island. So all of that had to be planned on how to swim out there and how long we could stay underwater and how far we had to swim back, because if the tide started to move us a little bit, we would have to swim a little further. And when you're in the water, you really can't see exactly where you are, so we would have to split apart about at least 500 to 1,000 feet spread out, so that we would all go out and swim a little bit distance from each other and be able to look in the water to see the shadow of the ship. And then we would have to communicate with each other to come back to that point to dive on that ship. So it's not something that you can just say, okay, let's go do it. The big thing that we wanted to do was take these sonobuoy tubes with tools so that we could dive down on the ship, and we were looking for portholes. We took enough tools with us that we could, wrenches and stuff that we could put in the sonobuoy, take it with us down there, get it out, and then use the sonobuoy to lift the tools, evacuate the air out of it, put air in it from our tank, and it would lift the weight and get the portholes and the tools all back to the surface, and then we could use it as a float to get us to shore, to give us a helping hand to swim the mile or so back. So the planning was all made. The day came up. The six of us took the picture getting ready. Then we got into the helo. We took a picture of us with all the gear stacked, and we flew on out. We landed over in Rota. We landed in the schoolhouse parking lot, and there were some Guamanian women there, and Guamanians women, majority of them are really kind of overweight. They're happy, jolly, overweight people. And they had two old Japanese mini trucks. So we loaded everything on the mini trucks and us, and the penga-penga grass on the island was 16 foot high. And we're driving through this penga-penga grass, and the trucks are knocking it over in front of us, but it's whipping up on the sides, and if it hits you, it could cut you and stuff. So it was kind of a chore not to get cut up or anything. And we told them where we wanted to go, where the sulfur mine was. Well, they drove right through that tanga grass, 16 foot high, and drove right up to the edge of the cliff and stopped and said, here's your cave down here. So how they knew exactly where it was and everything, because we couldn't see anything. We're in the back of the truck or sitting in the truck, and they were able to take us to the exact spot.